So, Spencer, to add to all the Bill O'Brien, will he leave for Boston College? Won't he? And I will say, I don't think it's fait accompli. I think it's very, very likely, but I don't think it's fait
Also, by
accompli.
the way, if he does leave, Ohio State fans, at least the ones that I saw, should be thrilled. Because all I saw when he got
Right.
hired was, oh, this is a terrible decision.
Yep.
Why would you do this? So if I see any fans other than Radu, I know you comment a lot on the show. We appreciate your comments as always. Follow Sons of the Shoe. It's a new show. 92 The Fan YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcast, specifically Apple, iTunes would be great. Anyway, or Odyssey or the Odyssey app. I should throw that one in there as well for the
It's free.
for the powers that be. But no, Radu, he's in the lane of it was a good hire with me. I think with you as well, Nick. But there were tons of people on Twitter who were just and I know it's Twitter, so I shouldn't read too much into it. But there were so many Ohio State fans ready to just trash the Bill O'Brien hire when it happened. So I don't want to see those same people now like, oh my gosh, this is Ryan Day. He drove another person away. He sucks. Like, this better not be like sky is falling moment for you because none of you really wanted this in the first place. I will say, though, I did get a kick out of some of the tweets yesterday. There was a lot on Monday, I should say. There was a lot of Bill O'Brien's tenure at Ohio State. The offense never threw an interception. They never lost a game. They never lost to Michigan. I was like, that's good. That's good. Bill O'Brien's going to go down as a legend at Ohio State.
I mean, I think the biggest impact, just before we get to the Ryan Day stuff and candidates, is the biggest question, I think, is does Julian Sayin follow him?
Yeah.
Because, like, in terms of, well, you're going to be able to find a good candidate. It's Ohio State. I think, now it becomes, are you going to choose the right candidate, which was the initial conversation with Bill O'Brien, as you mentioned. But, I mean, I think, listen, Bill O'Brien leaving, I'll be bummed because I thought it was a good hire. But my opinion on him leaving is going to be directly correlated to who they replace him with and what they value in replacing him. But I really think the number one thing is, does Sayin stay in Columbus or does he head to Boston College? Because that has long-term ramifications. I really like the idea that this year is Will Howard's year in Columbus, and then next year you set it up for the quarterback battle between Sayin and Aaron Nolan, because I like having options. I think that's how a guy like CJ Stroud became the best quarterback in the room. And I think that's how, like when you only have one guy and it's Aaron Nolan versus Lincoln Kienholz, whom I love, swagger, all that, South Dakota, what up? But like there is a part of me that goes, that's more of a, we're just going to give this kid the job and he's got to not screw it up. And I'm less comfortable with that. So the Sayin thing, I do think, is the biggest domino to fall in all of this.
He had a relationship with Bill O'Brien. Now, what's interesting is he had that relationship with Bill O'Brien, and there was no way for him to follow Bill O'Brien the first time because Bill O'Brien went to New England. But obviously, Tommy Rees was the OC this past year at Bama, so he still ended up going to Bama despite the fact that Bill O'Brien left. So you wonder if that means it's more of like, hey, yeah, I'm still happy at Ohio State. I'm good with this decision. I don't need to be with Bill O'Brien. It was just kind of a bonus. Or if because he's staying in the college ranks this time around, that he could follow him there. If that happens, I don't want to say all bets are off. I don't know if it makes Boston College like that much crazily better. But we talk about, the spreading of the wealth, if you will, or the parity around college football, and the fact that Duke is going to have a five-star recruited quarterback next year, Malik Murphy. The fact that Boston College is saying goes there, like followed Bill O'Brien. They'd have now a five-star recruit at Boston College of all places. Like, it is kind of cool to see some of that talent get spread around. And I wouldn't be overly worried because we know Ohio State obviously is pretty well set at the quarterback position with Aaron Nolan coming in this year. And he'll be kind of that guy of the future moving forward. So it just kind of, I want to say he gets the job, you hand it to him, but that conversation about, after this year when Will Howard's supposed to be the starter, who wins that competition, it kind of just answers itself where it would be Nolan. But so, yeah, we'll see how that kind of unfolds. There were some other players that mentioned playing with Bill O'Brien is a positive and that they were looking forward to that. But a lot of those guys, like Quinshon Judkins and others, they had already transferred to Ohio State before Bill O'Brien was even here. So I'm not as worried about them. But from a standpoint of could they lose somebody, I think Sayin would be the one. And it's interesting because I'm sure that'll get a lot of. I talk about Ohio State fans reacting to the Bill O'Brien news. I'm sure saying we're to follow Bill O'Brien, that would get a lot of Ryan Day hate talk as well. Oh, this guy lost another 5-star recruit. There he goes. But it's like, guys, you got to think about the context of it all, you know?
So, in the wake of all the Bill O'Brien noise, and will he go to Boston College? Will he not? Ryan Day is scheduled to speak to the media on Wednesday. No idea what he could speak about. Here's what I would like to hear. I want to hear an honest answer. If Bill has not been named the head coach of Boston College by then, where he stands on what losing him would be. And the other thing that I really want to know is, are you basically, are you just going to go look at the guys you've already looked at, which are some names we can get
Yeah.
to, or do you reopen a new search as kind of it's been about a month since you kind of started that initial search? And I think that
Yeah.
I do think that's really crucial. Like the way that you handle this is something. And listen, I don't necessarily have a preference of just call through the guys you were already looking at, or because I think there were some guys they really, really liked, and I think there was just the experience just gave Bill the edge. But like, I think you add, whether it's all right, we're just going to pick from guys we already talked to, we're going to restart a new search, and then I think the third thing is obvious. Does this mean the play calling duties are back on you? And I think you look at those three things. If Bill leaves and you hire somebody, if you already know the candidates, how likely are you to retain play calling? I think those are three huge
Yeah.
things you have to hear from Ryan on Wednesday.
I think maybe the biggest indicator that Bill O'Brien's leaving was the fact that this press conference was announced, because it seemed, I tried to kind of do some digging into whether or not this is normal for Ryan Day to speak randomly, Super Bowl week in February of all things. Our colleague Brendan Gulick, who covers the Buckeyes, he kind of mentioned he thinks it was somewhat normal because they haven't heard from Ryan Day in a while. And that could be true. But I kind of, reading the tea leaves, you see the press release come out and you're like, all right, with all the buzz about Bill O'Brien, this kind of feels like let's get everybody together and just kind of hunker down and answer some questions about the situation and where our head's at with it and what he's thinking. So it kind of feels like that's almost the obvious indicator. I know there was reports that as of Monday, Bill O'Brien was still in the building working with the team, and he was still on staff as the offensive coordinator. So I don't know that that's changed yet. And maybe you'll get the very Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland Browns answer of, we can't say anything at this time. We don't know anything. Just keep your mouth shut. But we'll see. Yeah, I think what you hit on in terms of the big key items for Day to address from the offensive play calling standpoint and who we might pursue is going to be the main topic of conversation, assuming that Bill leaves. And obviously, I think there's some interesting levels to that, because on one hand, Bill O'Brien, like you think back to the last episode, Nick, we talked about how, and Ryan Day's the interview he did with a station up here in Cleveland, he mentioned that he wasn't going to give the play calling up just for anybody. And Bill O'Brien seemed like sort of the exception to that rule, rather than just, some Joe Schmo first-time play caller at Ohio State, which is why, like, the name Jason Candle's been floated out a ton. He was somebody that they apparently looked at potentially for the job. And I love Jason Candle. I think Jason Candle would generally be a good hire. But I also wonder, in a year where Ryan Day knows pressure's on, his ass is on the line if they don't beat Michigan this year. His ass is on the line if they don't compete for a national championship this year. I wonder if bringing in Jason Candle into this level of a job and giving him play calling duties, I kind of wonder if that's the smartest move for Ryan Day, knowing that his job status kind of hinges on a guy who's never done it at that, like on a program of this magnitude. So that's an interesting one. And so part of me almost thinks, like, especially being this late in the game, and listen, it's Ohio State. They can get almost anybody they want. Does Ryan Day just almost take it back and retain it and work closely with Brian Hartline again to kind of do the offense? We'll see. But I think that obviously is question number one to be answered. Yes.
I think when it comes to the candidates, you mentioned Jason Candle, and I would have no problem. If Ryan Day came out and said, I think this guy's a future Power 5 head coach. I think what he's done at Toledo is fantastic, and I'm going to make a hire that helps us for the next 3 years. I like that. To me, shows big balls from Ryan Day. It also is not the thing they've spent the entire offseason doing. Nobody expects Bill O'Brien, if he stays, to be here 3 years from now. They just don't. You expect him to be here 1 to 2 years, use this job as a springboard to a good head coaching job. And so it would not surprise me if that was the candidate tree that they went down. And that includes Chip Kelly at UCLA, which it would be pretty bonkers to see a Big Ten coach leave as a head coach to be the OC somewhere. But if he really thinks, like, and one of my theories on him interviewing for all these OC jobs in the NFL is the guy knows his ass is grass probably next year. Now, it might be smarter just to take the buyout and you can still be somebody's OC next year. But Chip Kelly, and by the way, Chip Kelly was the reason Ryan Day was in the NFL. Here are some other names that I think fit that mold.
Well,
Josh
real quick, I was going to say Chip Kelly is interesting too because, first of all, them coming to the Big Ten, like you said, a Big Ten head coach now taking a step back to almost being offensive coordinator. It's also interesting because with how much money Ohio State's been throwing around, you got to pay, I think it's $1.5 million to just take him from UCLA. So I think that aspect of it's interesting as well.
So Josh McDaniels, who obviously just got deposed in Vegas, similar ideology behind Bill, except Josh has not called plays in college ever. I'll be honest with you. I think Josh is a better play caller than Bill would be. So
I agree.
Yeah, I just think the bigger question is, does he want to do the recruiting? But again, that's another short-term job. I think two other former college coaches to think about. One is Dino Babers, who got murked by Syracuse.
Yeah.
Spread concepts, grew up in that Baylor offense under Art Briles. And then the other one would be Dan Mullen. And I forgot this, but Ryan Day was actually, I think, a grad assistant
at Florida. Yeah,
at Florida when Mullen was there with Urban. So, I mean, if you hire Dan Mullen tomorrow, and Dan allegedly does not want to do the work that a head coach has to do now, maybe OC play caller is kind of that in between where he stays in college football but doesn't have to do the extent of the work that college head coaches have to do. So those would be some other, like, one lane, you'll be here for a year and maybe you get another job kind of guys.
I think Dan Mullen is the one to me that if I try to think the way just this offseason has gone for Ohio State and the way that Ryan Day was clearly thinking and bringing in Bill O'Brien, which was, listen, we know that this guy's probably not going to be here that long, but we're looking for like a quick hit. Let's get this offense rolling. We got some really good talent here. We got to go. Basically what I said earlier, jobs on the line, asses on the line. I got to go win. Bill O'Brien's the guy, and I'm willing to hand off play calling to him. If I'm thinking, and again, using that line of Ryan Day saying he wouldn't have done it for anybody, if I'm thinking of other people that sort of rise to the level of this is the guy that Ryan Day would be willing to give a play calling to, I think Dan Mullen fits that billing. They have the relationship kind of built in, like you mentioned. I think the fact that he's done it at a high level when he was at Florida is a big deal, and that should obviously warrant some interest. And yeah, I think the fit makes a ton of sense there. If they were to turn things over to Dan Mullen, he's got the experience that you're looking for. So I like that one. That's probably the one that stands out the most. I'm with you on. I really, really, really like the Jason Candle idea, and if they went that route. But like I said, I'm hesitant to think that he'd be willing to give up play calling to somebody who's going to basically have the fate of his job in his hands, who's never done it at a program of this caliber and this size. So that's the one hesitation I have, because I think Jason Candle's a star in the making in terms of a coach. It's just about finding the right time to do that. Like, if that's going to be the case, if you're going to give it to Jason Candle, the difference between Jason Candle and Brian Hartline is what? Like, I get that one's a head coach at a MAC school and one's not, but we've already said Brian Hartline could have gone to a MAC school by now and started his career that way too. So I think that's what's also interesting, is you don't want to ruffle feathers there. The other one I would throw out just as kind of a off the cuff one is Joe Moorhead at Akron.
Yeah.
Guy who's proven he can do it at a high level. He's been at Mississippi State. He was at Oregon prior to going and taking the Akron job. So he's a really good play caller. He's proven some things with some of the bigger programs out there, and he's not too far, sort of right in your own backyard down the road. Now, I know some people, some locals that probably listen to this show are Akron fans and wouldn't necessarily want to see Joe Moorhead go, because I know it's a feel good story him coming back.
Akron does
but,
not have that many fans. It's
well,
three
Ken
guys.
Carman. So I was thinking about Ken. I was thinking about Ken Carman as I said it. So.
And the next time I see Ken Carman on the sidelines in an Akron game will be the first time. But I digress. And honestly, the next time he sees me on the sidelines in an Akron game, it'll also be the first time.
He would be at the sideline at a basketball game, because he'll be at the MAC tournament, I'm sure, but not football. You're right.
Joe Philbin is another guy that was an offensive analyst. He was linked to the Iowa job. I don't know how serious that is, but he was an analyst on the staff last year, former NFL head coach. There is, also a former O-line coach in the NFL, so he could help Justin Fry.
Brian Johnson was another name I saw.
And I tell you, I love that name. I honestly thought he should have gotten more run. I thought, you want to talk about scapegoating? I thought he got treated poorly in Philadelphia.
Well, the offense regressed. That's why. That's the biggest reason.
Why did the offense regress? You lost. The defense regressed too. The offense and defense, true. Teams think of things in a one-year vacuum, and I hate when guys get pigeonholed as the reason something happened. Not everybody you hire is ready day one to be as good as the last guy. And sometimes you have to be patient. And Brian's got the Florida ties with Dan Mullen. Brian played in
his
college.
Offense was top 10 almost every year he was there. I think if Brian Johnson, if you were to find an opportunity that made sense for him, I think getting him back in the college ranks and him almost trying to because coming out of the college level, he was almost in the ilk of Jason Candle. People thought he was the next big thing. Great play caller, going to the NFL to get this opportunity. So if he almost wants to restore that credibility in himself after this, again, he's getting put in a box like this might be the chance to do that. Come to Ohio State, be the offensive coordinator, call the plays, and show that you can still do this thing, and you almost cleanse yourself of anything that happened in Philly.
So if Bill leaves, of the experienced guys, Josh McDaniels would be my number one candidate to be OC and play caller. If you're going a long-term route, give me Brian Johnson 1 and then Jason Candle 2. And I think any of those, 90% of the names we mentioned, I think are going to be just fine here. I don't think you need a killer like a Bill O'Brien or a Josh McDaniels. It never hurts, but those would be the three guys. All right, two guys from one path, one guy from another. Where do you kind of stand on in which lane are your favorite guys?
I'd probably put Dan Mullen 1. I'd probably be with you, where I'd have Brian Johnson probably as my number 2, and then Jason Candle is my number 3. Josh McDaniels would probably, if they got Josh McDaniels, I'd be fine with that. I'm just not really realistically thinking he's going to come to the college ranks. Maybe I don't know. Maybe he would. If he's really looking for a job, itching, he'd get back to Ohio, where obviously he's from. Maybe there's something to that. But I think that would be my top 3. Probably be Mullen, Brian Johnson, and then Jason Candle, with maybe the caveat of I think Joe Moorhead would be a good one too. Maybe as 3B, 2B, 3B, whatever. So
and then maybe Joe Philbin, and then maybe Josh McDaniels. Your list is growing. I don't hate it. I'm just have to call you out.
I didn't put Josh McDaniels on it. I said if they got him, I'd be fine with it. But I think I like the 3 main ones I named, and probably Joe Moorhead.
And then a 4th and a 5th and maybe a 6th there. I'm just busting. All right, guys. Who should be
Ken Dorsey?
They may be
Alex Van Pelt.
Oh, actually, real quick, I wouldn't put it past maybe placing a call if Julian Sayin is out there. You don't want to lose him. Maybe make a call to Tommy Rees. I mean, that's my Ohio State on Cleveland crime. But he's young. He's been the OC at Notre Dame and at Alabama. He's got the Brian Kelly stamp of approval, which is really hard to get as a young play caller. I don't know you need him, but if you want to think of something again as a guy who can be here 1 to 3 years and then take over his own program, that's the kind of guy.
I'd be curious to hear Reese's reasoning, because again, on the heels of Jeff Hafley talking about, this just isn't for me anymore, and I was ready to try go to the NFL and leave sort of the landscape of college football behind. I'd be interested to hear some of Reese's motivations, because I would think So, I mean, he did a lot with one of the lesser talented Alabama offenses in recent history to get them to the playoff, win the SEC championship game. Like, he is considered one of the better offensive minds in college football. And so for him to sort of leave this trajectory behind where he was hitting on some of the bigger program OC jobs, and again, coming from Brian Kelly and all this, I was kind of surprised by that he maybe didn't get more run or calls to be an OC somewhere else. So it's not a bad thought by you that now that Ohio State's in the situation they're in, that maybe they place a call and say, hey, do you want to come back to the college ranks? Do you want to still call plays and do all that, but do it here at a program that's, again, very prestigious and one of the higher or better programs in the country? It'd be an interesting one. I like where your head's at with that.
All right, guys, who should be the heir apparent to the OC job if Bill O'Brien pieces out for Boston College here? We got one segment to go, but first, a quick word from our sponsors.